When I was in high school, I had a limited texting plan, and I was always accidentally going over it, which made my parents mad. I decided to switch to WhatsApp instead to communicate with my friends. My parents always said that if I spent as much time studying as I did texting with my friends, I wouldn't have a C- in algebra. It was true. I not only hated math, but was terrible at it. I tried to get my parents to realize that it didn't matter how much I studied, it was like trying to learn another language, and it just didn't make sense to me. It was a couple of weeks before Christmas break, and it was midterms time. Out of my 6 midterms, the only one I was worried about was algebra. My parents said that I had to get at least a B on the midterm, or I was going to have to quit the cheer team so I would have more time to study. This was not an option for me. Cheer was my life, and I knew I couldn't let my team down like that. I was already sweating nervously when my teacher, Mr. Sweeney, began handing out the tests. We had to wait until everyone had one before we could begin. We would have 50 minutes to finish it, which I doubted would be enough time for me. When Mr. Sweeney said we could start, I started flipping through the test. I had studied so hard, and I didn't even remember learning some of this stuff. My heart was beating like crazy, and I began to panic more and more as I worked through the test, skipping the parts that I didn't know. There were about 15 minutes left when London, the girl across from me, stood up and turned in her test. Of course, she was the first one to finish. I thought with a little bit of annoyance. London was the smartest girl in the class and was always the first person to raise her hand to any question. Suddenly, I got an idea. It wasn't something that I would usually do, but I was desperate. Could it work? I walked up to the front of the classroom, acting like I was about to turn in my test. As soon as I laid it down on the pile, I quietly said, "Oops, forgot to do the backside," just loud enough for Mr. Sweeney to hear. When I picked up my test again, I made sure to also pick up London's test underneath. I was sure my heart was beating loud enough for the whole room to hear, but when I walked by Mr. Sweeney, he only smiled at me. He hadn't realized what I had done. When I got back to my seat at the back of the classroom, I slid London's test out from underneath my own. I then copied her answers onto my test, knowing they were probably right. Once I was done, I turned in both tests, doing my best to look casual. I felt guilty for cheating, but also was a little bit proud of myself for getting away with it. I never cheated, and I knew what I had done was wrong, but I didn't have any other choice. I would lose everything if I failed that midterm. That night, I got online to check to see if my grade had been posted yet. Sure enough, it had. I gasped when I saw that my grade had been updated and I had gotten an A-. That was even better than I had been expecting. I was so excited and rushed to show my parents, who were equally as thrilled. They would never know that I cheated. That night, I was relaxing in my bed, scrolling through my phone when I realized I had received a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. I clicked it open and was surprised when I realized what it said. "I know what you did." Was this some sort of prank? Or maybe they had the wrong number? "Who is this?" I texted back. "I'm your worst enemy," the number answered. I was about to block the number and be done with it when all of a sudden it sent another message. "I know you cheated on the algebra midterm." My stomach dropped as I began to panic. Someone had seen me? I thought of all the kids who sat near the front of the classroom who could have possibly seen me take in London's test. None of them seemed to have been looking at me. They were all too focused on their exam. "What do you want?" I texted the person back. "You will follow my list of demands, or I will tell Mr. Sweeney the truth about what you did," the person messaged me. I grew even more terrified as I realized I was being blackmailed. "You don't have any proof of anything," I wrote back. A few seconds passed by, and suddenly, a video came through. I gasped as I realized it was of me sitting at my desk in class, and the video zoomed in, and you could see the name of London printed on the test that I had stolen to copy off of. It was clear proof that I had cheated. "I'll do whatever you want," I texted the person back. I was desperate. If they turned me in, I would get a 0 on the test for cheating. The person told me that at school tomorrow, I would have to dress up like a little kid. I would have to wear pigtails in my hair. a My Little Pony t-shirt, and overalls. If they didn't, they would send Mr. Sweeney the video. I was shocked this person was trying to do everything they could to embarrass me, but I had no choice. It was either this or I would fail my midterm and have to quit cheer. That night after my little sister fell asleep, I snuck into her room and grabbed one of her My Little Pony t-shirts. It would be tight on me, but I would have to make it work. Luckily, I already had a pair of overalls in my closet left over from an old Halloween costume. The next morning, I woke up and got dressed extra early so that my parents wouldn't have a chance to ask me why I was dressed like an absolute idiot. As I walked through the hallway at school, every single person turned to stare at me. In confusion. People were laughing at me and making fun of me. I had never felt more embarrassed. That day, when I sat down in algebra class, I scanned the room to see if anyone was paying special attention to me. I wanted to figure out who had been threatening me. Mr. Sweeney had just started teaching when I got a text from an unknown number. "Go sharpen your pencil," it read. I got up and did as I was told, Mr. Sweeney shooting me an annoyed glare as the loud sound of the sharpener filled the room. By the time I got back to my seat, I had gotten another message. "Take your pencil and stab yourself in the hand," it said. My heart began beating like crazy. I couldn't do that. Another message popped up. "Do it now, or I'm showing Mr. Sweeney the video," it said. I took a deep breath, raised my pencil in the air, and brought it back down onto my hand. It cut into my skin and blood began running down my hand, and I was doing my best not to cry when I received yet another message. "Do it 3 more times," it said. I was shaking at this point, and the kid sitting next to me was looking at me like I was crazy. I stabbed my hand again and again. There was blood on my desk and my clothes. The lead from my pencil was stuck in my hand. I couldn't take this anymore. I raised my hand and said, "Mr. Sweeney, can I speak with you for a second?" He looked at me with confusion. "Can it wait until after class?" he said. "No, it's really important," I told him. We ended up stepping out into the hallway as I explained to him how I had cheated on the midterm. He was disappointed, but explained to me that because I had come to him and told him the truth, he said he would allow me to retake the test after school instead of giving me a 0. I thanked him, and we went back to class. Even though I had lost my good grade, I had never felt more relieved. Whoever was blackmailing me no longer had anything to use against me. I never found out who it was that had been messaging me, but I never heard from them again either. When I was in college, I lived a carefree lifestyle and partied all the time. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. After all, isn't that what you're supposed to do when you're in college? I was having the time of my life, hanging out at fraternities, staying out late, and making new friends. To me, college was a paradise. That is, until one of the scariest things in my life happened. It all started on a Friday night. The night started just like any other. My friends and I were pre-gaming in my dorm and getting ready. The bathroom counter was covered with makeup products, curling irons, and hairsprays, and everyone was fighting to get enough room in the mirror. When we were all finally ready, we caught an Uber and made our way to one of the most popular bars on campus. We were meeting some of our guy friends there. The bar was packed with people, and everyone was dancing and singing. I made my way through the crowd up to the counter, where I was going to order a drink. Before I could say anything to a bartender, a hand reached out next to me and slid a $20 bill across the counter. I turned and looked, and it was an older man, old enough to be my dad. He wore a suit jacket and a dress shirt, and his hair was slicked back. "Put whatever she wants on my tab," he told the bartender, and I realized he was offering to buy me a drink. I wasn't about to say no to that, so I thanked him politely and ordered a Cosmopolitan. As I sipped my drink, the man asked me questions about school and my major. It turned out that he was actually an alumni and had graduated from my school a long time ago. He was in town for the weekend because of the big football game. For a while, I enjoyed listening to him talk about the good old days when he was in school, but after a while I realized I was 3 drinks in and had no idea where my friends were. I was feeling tipsy and knew that they would be worried if they couldn't find me. I thanked the man for the drinks and told him I would have to be on my way. Surprisingly, he asked me for my phone number. He was probably twice my age, and I thought he was just being nice, not trying to hit on me. Instead of telling him no, I wrote down a fake number. "You sure this is your real number?" he asked me, looking suspicious. I nodded my head, trying to look innocent, and then slipped off into the crowd. The rest of the night went off without any problems, and thankfully, I ended up safe in my bed that night. The next evening, I was getting ready to go to a house party when I got a message on WhatsApp from a number I didn't recognize. "I know you gave me a fake number, and now you're going to pay," the message said. My stomach dropped as I realized it had to be the guy from the bar. How had he gotten my real number? I decided to just ignore the message. I would probably never see that man again. That night at the party, I ended up drinking way more than I should have. I knew I needed to go home, but the guy who had driven me was passed out on the couch. I decided I would have to walk back to my dorm. It would take about 30 minutes. I had just left the house when I got another message from an unknown number. "I'm going to kill you. I'll break every bone in your body," it said. I was terrified. It was so dark, and there was nobody on the streets. I had no choice but to keep going. I was about halfway home when a figure stepped out of the shadows and stood in front of me. My heart began pounding as I realized it was the man from the bar, and he looked mad. "You think you can just use me for a few drinks, do you?" he asked, stepping closer to me. I could only shake my head no. He took another step closer to me, and I took off running as fast as I could. The alcohol was still thick in my system, and I fell to the ground, face first. The man only let out a terrible, evil laugh. I was trying to stand back when he stomped on my leg. I heard an awful snapping sound, and I knew it had broken. I was screaming, desperate for someone to hear me. The man flipped me over so I was on his back. He then kicked me right in the face, causing me to spit out blood. I was begging him to stop. "You like to give out fake numbers, huh? Maybe I should cut off your fingers so you can't do that anymore," he said. He then reached in his pocket and pulled out a long bladed knife. "Please don't," I screamed as I sobbed. He knelt to the ground and roughly grabbed my hand. He had just begun to slice open my thumb when I heard a loud voice in the distance yell, "Freeze! Hands up!" I could see red and blue lights, and I knew I had been saved. The man was handcuffed and taken away, and I was taken to the hospital. The police later told me that that man was wanted for murder. He would have followed through with his threat to kill me if a police car hadn't been passing by at that exact moment. Be careful when you talk to strangers. My dad is the owner of this big company, so I had a lot of money growing up. I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want to come off as spoiled or for my friends to think of me differently. One night I was hanging out in my room getting ready to start homework when I got a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. I opened it and there was both a text message and a video. My throat went dry when I read the text message. "You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to wire $1 million to this account, or this is what is going to happen to you. An account number as listed below." My fingers shaking, I clicked on the video. It was a dark room filled with candles, not a place I recognized. The camera zoomed in on a female mannequin. It had been dressed up in my school uniform, complete with the knee socks I wore every day and my brown platform shoes. There was a picture of my face that had been cut out and taped to the face of the mannequin. The camera was set down and a masked figure came into view. They were dressed all in black and had gloves on. By their height, I guessed they were a male. The man stepped towards the mannequin and suddenly, in a violent rage, ripped the clothes off of the mannequin, making me gasp. He stepped out of the frame for just a few seconds and then returned with a giant knife. I watched in complete horror as he grabbed the mannequin that was supposed to be me and violently used the knife to hack its head open. Once he had finished, he picked up the severed head and held it in the air. He then walked super close to the camera, held the head up, and in a deep, scary voice said, "This will be you if you don't get me the money in time." Terror washed over me as I realized he was threatening to brutally assault me and then chop off my head. No sooner than the video finished did I receive a bunch of new messages from the same number. It was a picture of me walking home from school, eating lunch with my friends, swinging on the swing at recess, and finally, a picture of my house. I realized what he was doing. He was giving me the proof that he knew where I was and could get me. I began screaming and showed the video to my parents. They called the police, who took my phone so they could track the number. For months, I had 24-hour guards standing watch over me. They went everywhere I went, even to class. The police were able to track the number, but it led them to an abandoned house. To this day, the person who threatened me is still free. If you liked this story, check out the other new video on Anna Horror. 3 true Instagram catfish horror stories. It's guaranteed to send a shiver down your spine. Sleep tight.